This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
Tom Murphy now joins us. Tom, good morning, and a good feeling on a Tuesday after your Atlanta Falcons beat the Niners over the weekend.
Well, it was nice to cover a Razorback win out in Provo and have a good time while we were doing it, and then to get home and put on my Sirius XM and hear us handling the 49ers. So we were a home dog by 4-something points. That was nice. The Falcons are the only team in the NFL that have covered every week of the season so far. So that means they're performing above the average fans' expectations, and they've performed above mine. We were predicted to be the last team in the NFL to win a game, and maybe with a 2-15 record, and we're already 3-3. So, and we had great chances to win the games we lost too.
Tom, we saw the return of K.J. Jefferson out in Provo. He led the offense on 8 consecutive scoring drives. Maybe the most impressive was the one they didn't score on at the end, where they went over 10 minutes of offense. But nonetheless, the offense was the story on a road trip out west.
It sure was. When you think about it, fumble lost on the first possession, and they were moving the ball. Second possession, they started at the 1 and got it out to, I can't remember, somewhere around the 20 or something. And we're going, and then 3 consecutive incomplete passes. Then they went on this binge. And, yeah, you're right. They converted so many third downs, 12 out of 15. KJ just seemed to be in a groove, variety of receivers. Matt Lander. I like the stuff they did near the goal line. It looks to me like they put in you remember how they were stuffed in the run against Mississippi State. Mm-hmm. So they had some goal-to-go type pass plays in this game, and the line afforded KJ time to look, and it looked like to me BYU was in zone a lot down there, and Matt Landers found little holes in the zone, and they were just on fire. And I know BYU's not going to be considered one of the top defensive teams in the country. They've had their injuries too, but I think it was a good tonic for the Razorbacks heading into these final 5.
Well, now that you had a few days to reflect on it, and you think about the game plan this team used, I thought it was a really nice evolution, if you will, or just opening up your mind a little bit. Maybe I'm probably overstating that with what Kendall Briles did. I love the way the passing game worked, and it kind of led the offense. And one thing you saw consistently, and we noted throughout the game, they kind of had a check down guy, a safety valve, always kind of out in the flat. They went just a few times there, but I like the kind of the involvement, if you will, of the passing game and what we saw with their game plan in Provo.
No question. You could tell they scouted BYU up really well, and it looked like they preferred maybe some of the downfield stuff. But every time I looked, A.J. Green or Rocket or somebody would be out in the flats open. And there was a few times you're like, he's open. And KJ threw deeper, and that was probably just the second drive only. But otherwise, that was open all day. The little wheel to Rashad Dubinion for a touchdown right before half, that was a beautiful thing. I mean, when you think about it, the game turned on the 4th down when they snapped the ball, and they weren't supposed to. Jaron Hall didn't handle it. Latavius Brini got in there and recovered it, and that led to a touchdown. And then the Hudson Clark pick, and then driving down and getting the touchdown with 40 seconds left. And then BYU mangled the time when they got the ball back with 40 seconds left. So that part of the game, when it went from 21-17 to 31-21, was when the game was won. And I have to credit the defense, too. BYU was tearing them up, and then they lost Malik Chavis and had to shuffle guys around even more. Keywan Parker comes in and gets a lot more PT, and it turns out Keywan played pretty well. So even though this has been a tough go of it, you've got guys like Trent Gordon and Keywan Parker and some other guys who had not been playing, who are now getting valuable experience that provides further depth. And the more you play, the more confident you're going to be. And the Razorback secondary needed that.
Keywan's a redshirt freshman, and he's a guy that hadn't, as you just said, not played to that, not a lot to that point. Tom, how important was it to get that experience? And with 5 games remaining and the timetables of Slusher and the 2 Johnsons still kind of up in the air?
Right. Well, it was hugely important. And Sam Pittman sounded super confident that when they head to Auburn in 2 weeks, that the Slusher and the two Johnsons could be back. And if that's the case, I mean, think about where you are with the depth. And honestly, when you play cornerback and at the end of the game, your name hasn't been brought up very much, then you played pretty doggone well. I mean, I'm sure Keywan Parker, gave up this or that, but he didn't give up something over his head. And, he just made plays. I mean, and Trent Gordon, from the first time he came in, I know Mississippi State hit a pass over his head. I think it was the Caleb Ducking touchdown. He's played better too. And so, everybody had to band together back there. I've never seen a position group more disturbed by injuries than this one. And starting with Jalen Catalon, their leader and all that. And, I mean, Simeon Blair is a good kid. I know he's a great leader, calls out plays, but, he had a PI and I think gave up a touchdown in that game too. So they're hanging in there. And when you're in the situation Arkansas is in, hanging in there is what you have to do. And I reflect back on this. If they had just won the A&M game, which they should have, they'd be 5-2. They'd be in a much better position. But they're going to go down to Auburn and give it a run. That's going to be a tough game. Doesn't matter what happens between now and that game. It's going to be a tough game to go win.
So let's go a little deeper in the secondary and in this conversation. Hudson Clark ends up moving to safety in the middle of the field in this game after those injuries. Not a spot you really ever envisioned him in because you thought Catalon would be there forever, and the injuries have taken him away. He seemed to be more effective there than corner, in my estimate. What was your evaluation of that, and have maybe you found the right fit moving forward considering the injuries for Clark, who was named Defensive Player of the Week?
Yeah, he had a really good game. And, he started at the middle safety. If I'm remembering all this right, started safety, Chavis goes down, he goes to corner for the rest of that series, and then Keywan Parker comes in and plays the rest of the game, and Clark's back at safety. He just was in the middle of everything. He read the deep play late in the first half and picked that one. They were in a zone, and they did some stuff and moved the zone over one, and that put him on the left side, and he made the play, the offense's right side, and it was a huge play in that game. The teams that can pound the ball, the way Mississippi State did, and that was his gap on the Dylan Johnson 30-yard touchdown run, and, Tank Bigsby and some guys as we go down the line, like the Ole Miss guys, are going to be able to pound it a little more. So you just hope that you get your depth back. And Hudson Clark's a valuable guy. And Sam Pittman pointed this out about him. Look, he said, hey, number 7, boy, he can really run it. Talking about Joquavius Marks. The point being that you can go a long way with kids who are there for the team, who are maybe playing out of position, a little light for their spot. And I don't know what the future will hold for him going forward. I would think that Chavis would be able to come back for the Auburn game, but, we'll see. We'll find out next week how that goes.
I think an underrated part of the injury aspect is the health, the bumper pool, which Coach Pittman alluded to after the Mississippi State game. We're talking about all these defensive backs getting healthy. Tom, how important is it for your guy up the middle, your captain, to kind of have a weekend off?
Yeah, it'll be good for Bumper. Here he is, a fifth-year guy. He's got a lot of snaps under his belt. Obviously, a lot of tackles under his belt. I don't know what it is with his hip, but, if your hip's aching, it's hard to pivot and run hard and everything. So any amount of rest he can get is super valuable as he goes down the stretch in his career. He and Drew Sanders, have played a lot of snaps. But I'll tell you, the more Pooh Paul gets on the field, the more you see some plays being made. He had some in that game as well. So, a healthy Bumper pool down the stretch, and Arkansas needs to get a few more wins and go to the best bowl they can.
Yeah, you think about what Arkansas linebacker core is going to look like next year. Bumper's going to be gone. Drew Sanders, unless something wild happens, he's going to be gone. He's the number 1 projected inside linebacker by Mel Kiper Jr. I really enjoyed what I've seen from Chris Pooh Paul this year. What kind of jump do you want him to make in these last 5 games and maybe some of the stuff that he's struggled with, Tom?
Well, I've not broken down the film to tell you Pooh Paul struggles in whatever. But he's a physical guy. He's a team leader. Like when you hear him talk, it's more like, he's talking about the whole picture. He's talking about bringing other guys up, and so he speaks like a team leader. So I think what you've got is a guy who's like on track to be a defensive captain, things like that, leader of the defense.
I think it helps his dad's a coach too, right? I mean, you have that coaching talk, that lineage, and that DNA that seems to come off him too.
All very valuable, yes. And I saw his dad outside the stadium in Provo walking up. Just a beautiful, magnificent setting. The temperature was right. It was a gorgeous day. That was a super good day for football, and for the Razorbacks' sake, it made it better. They came away with a win. But, yeah, Poopaw, Jordan Crook, there's some guys coming up. I mean, Jackson Woodard, whenever he got on the field last year, the guy made plays. I mean, maybe he's not as fast as some other guys. I don't know the ins and outs of why he hasn't played a lot at linebacker this year, but you've seen him make plays. And then you got the Caden Henleys and some other guys coming up through the ranks who, they seem to have a little bit more depth. I mean, it's similar to me into the defensive backfield where they went into the season. You're like, well, there's a decent amount of depth here. And in the backfield, it got tested immediately and continues to be tested. And even though they're giving up a bunch of yardage, they just switched back to their double cloud last week after they got torn up early and got off the field a few times. And that was in that game, just getting off the field a few times. Dwight McLaughlin's strip of Puka Nacua, who, by the way, what a beautiful player Puka Nacua is. But the strip Dwight McLaughlin had and the Clark recovery, just getting off the field a few times was super big for them.
I thought we got a little more insight into Sam Pittman and the way he manages players and sets expectations. The benching of Rocket Sanders, which we were all wondering, what is he hurt? What's going on? Does he have his helmet? He was just standing on the sideline thinking about that fumble, getting a little time to kind of figure out how to get your hands to stay on the ball. And I thought we got a little insight after the game into exactly how Sam Pittman does business. It's not surprising, Tom, that a player that fumbles gets to stand for a while, but we're talking about one of your star players. You're one of your premier players. He handled it just the way a lot of old school coaches would do that.
Yeah, and Rocket was motivated by it, and he understands. I mean, he had the fumble, and he twisted his ankle on that play too. And I heard TV kind of referencing what you just said, like where is he and all that. Well, the truth of it is, they trust AJ Green and Rashad DeBinion and Dominic Johnson very well, and there could come a time. I mean, truly, Rocket Sanders is a excellent lead back. He's on pace to rush for, it was more than 1,200 yards going into last week and probably higher now. But they could, AJ Green or DeBinion could probably be doing quite the same business. And honestly, they both had some really flash plays in that game, the DeBinion touchdown, and I know he had another really good run that he broke some tackles on too. But I do take your point that Rocket came back motivated. He's a very respectful, team-oriented kid. The personal numbers are good for him, but I do believe that kind of sent a message that if you can do this to your ace lead back guy, then that's for anybody on the team.
The reality is, if he doesn't have to watch for a while, he probably busts 200 yards in the game. Is probably a reality. And at one point during the game, I was seated on one side of Andrew Hutchinson. You were on the other. He leaned over and said, hey, Rocket's on the same pace for this season that Darren McFadden was on in his. So, I mean, we're not talking about he's just having a good run of a few weeks, Tom. We're talking about historical type numbers that are possible. I mean, you still got LSU and Ole Miss down the road, but you got to play Auburn first. But, I mean, that's the kind of season he's having. When we start talking about the original number 5 and you're on pace for those kind of numbers with this kind of schedule, it's pretty noteworthy.
It's very noteworthy. And, yeah, there have been some tough defenses along the way through all this. And he's gotten 100-plus in all but 2 games so far. One thing to keep in mind, however, Darren McFadden, 2007, he still had the South Carolina game left, which, as we all know, wound up with 321. And I don't see the South Carolina defense the rest of the way for Rocket. So, but still, let's don't take anything away from Rocket Sanders. If he stays apace, it's going to be 1,300 plus, I suppose. In
some ways, it was like being in the twilight zone last week in Provo. I mean, fans were so nice, so welcoming. I mean, I had someone walk up to me as I was kind of standing in line around the fans waiting on the team to come in to get some photos of that for our social media. And some guy walked up and said, hey, just thank you for being here. Glad y'all traveled out. I mean, that doesn't happen anywhere
That's
else.
not going to happen at all.
They handed out ice cream in the stands to the fans. I mean, it was like, I mean, while it was beautiful and the mountains, the Wasatch Mountains were awesome to look at, it was like being in the Twilight Zone compared to the rest of the SEC.
Yeah, I made that comment to several of the BYU staffers, like, nah, you're not used to this in the SEC. And then there's some places where you go where they're genuinely happy people that you've met over the years. But this was fans and everything, and it did feel like a throwback to like 1950s America or something like that. So, yeah, it was really cool to see. It makes you feel good inside, and for the Razorbacks, they get a win, and it makes them feel even better inside.
Now, a guy did cut me off in traffic trying to get back over to I-15. That's a whole other thing. They were really nice until they lost and the game was over. But
Football is back, and BetOnline remains your number one source for all your football betting needs this season. You'll find the latest odds, matchup info, player news, and game trends. And as your continued source for all sports wagering info, BetOnline features live betting, free contests, live scores, and giveaways all season long. Always the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports and events like MLB, MMA, tennis, boxing, and even golf. Head to betonline.ag to join and receive your 100% welcome bonus with your first deposit. Make sure to use the promo code BELIEVE to receive your rewards. That's BLEAV. Bet online, where the game starts.